Released footage of 50 fighter jets striking the underground compound of the Ayatollah.
3.2 million Iranians have been displaced by the conflict.
Iran's capital, Tehran, has been bombarded by Israeli forces as the conflict escalates on two fronts in the region.
Inside Iran, Israeli strikes continuing in what they've described as a new stage of the war. Iranian officials say more than 1,300 people have now been killed.
On March 7, 2026, something changed in the Middle East that cannot be undone. Not a skirmish, not an airstrike on a single building. A systematic, coordinated and meticulously planned destruction of the most expensive and strategically significant military infrastructure Iran had ever built. 40 years of construction. Billions of dollars invested. Mountains hollowed out, reinforced and packed with ballistic missiles, suicide drones, launch crews and command centers. All of it collapsed. All of it sealed. All of it buried under thousands of tons of rock and rubble that no engineering team can clear without being immediately struck from above. Before we get into exactly how this happened and what it means for the balance of power in the region, understand that this topic is deeply controversial. Military analysts are divided on the full extent of the damage. Iranian officials deny catastrophic losses. Western intelligence agencies have not confirmed every detail publicly. What satellite imagery shows, what leaked intelligence suggests, and what independent analysts have pieced together tells a story that is still unfolding in real time. Whatever your position on this conflict, the military and strategic implications of what happened underground in Iran are unlike anything the modern world has seen. Subscribe and hit the notification bell because this story is evolving every single day. To understand why this matters, you have to understand what Iran actually built underground over the last 4 decades. This was not a few bunkers dug into hillsides. This was a civilization built beneath the earth. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps constructed what they proudly called missile cities, vast subterranean complexes stretching for kilometers beneath Iranian mountains, complete with storage halls large enough to house hundreds of ballistic missiles, tunnels wide enough to drive heavy launchers through, command and control centers hardened against electromagnetic pulses, living quarters for permanent underground crews, independent power generation, emergency fuel lines, and ventilation systems engineered to circulate fresh air indefinitely. The main tunnel corridors were built at depths between 30 and 50 meters, which means they sat deeper underground than a 15-story building stands tall above the surface. The walls were not simply excavated rock. They were doubly reinforced concrete with shock-absorbing foundations and blast-resistant steel doors at every junction, designed specifically to contain the energy of nearby detonations and prevent catastrophic chain reaction collapses. The geometry of the tunnels was not linear either. Engineers deliberately designed them with curves and bends so that a shockwave entering from one end would dissipate before traveling the full length of the corridor. Iran did not build these facilities to survive a conventional airstrike. Iran built these facilities to survive a nuclear war. Think about what that level of construction actually cost. Estimates for just 5 kilometers of tunnel in Tehran ran between $150 and $188 million under normal commercial conditions. And that was before accounting for the extraordinary secrecy requirements, the military-grade reinforcement specifications, the blast doors, the independent systems, and the sheer remoteness of many construction sites. Iran built not 5 kilometers but hundreds of kilometers but hundreds of tunnels across dozens of separate sites scattered from the mountains near Tabriz in the northwest to the facilities outside Shiraz in the south, from the Imam Ali base near Korumbad in the west to the extensive networks beneath central Iran. The total investment was not hundreds of millions, it was multiple billions of dollars accumulated over decades of continuous construction. Under normal tunneling conditions in Iranian geology, contractors could excavate roughly 10 meters of tunnel per day. That means 5 kilometers of tunnel required at minimum 500 days of continuous drilling, blasting and reinforcing, roughly 17 months of uninterrupted work for a single section. Iran was building dozens of sections simultaneously across the country for 40 years. The scale of human labor, engineering expertise, financial commitment, and strategic patience that went into this network was genuinely extraordinary by any measure. And inside those tunnels, Iran stored everything that made it a regional military power. Thousands of short and medium-range ballistic missiles, rows upon rows of Shahed suicide drones lined up in underground storage halls the IRGC filmed and released as propaganda, complete with dramatic lighting and a ticking clock soundtrack meant to intimidate enemies. launch vehicles, transporter erector launchers capable of carrying missiles to the surface, elevating them and firing within minutes of emerging from tunnel entrances. Production facilities where missiles were assembled underground, eliminating the vulnerability of surface factories that satellites could locate and strike. Command centers where officers coordinated launches across the entire network simultaneously. Iran had essentially moved its entire offensive military capability underground, trading the flexibility of mobile surface launchers for what it believed was the absolute invulnerability of buried facilities. Analysts at the time noted this strategic choice carried its own risks. What used to be mobile and difficult to locate is now less mobile and easier to strike. Iran heard that warning and dismissed it. The tunnels, Iranian military planners calculated, was simply beyond the reach of any existing weapon. That calculation was the most catastrophic strategic miscalculation in modern Iranian military history. What Iran's planners failed to fully account for was the decades America spent quietly solving the problem of finding and destroying exactly what Iran was building. Modern reconnaissance technology transformed the challenge of locating underground infrastructure from an intelligence impossibility into a solvable engineering problem. American spy satellites equipped with synthetic aperture radar emit microwave pulses toward the Earth's surface and measure the precise reflection patterns that return. When those waves encounter a void, a tunnel, a buried chamber, the reflection pattern changes in ways that sophisticated algorithms trained on years of data can identify with high confidence. The Earth above a tunnel does not look the same to radar as solid rock. The void creates a detectable anomaly, and American systems had been cataloging those anomalies across Iranian territory for years. Thermal imaging added another layer of certainty. Underground facilities cannot hide the heat they generate. Computers running, ventilation systems circulating air, people living and working below the surface. All produce thermal signatures that gradually migrate upward through rock and soil and become detectable at the surface as subtle temperature anomalies against the cooler surrounding ground. Particularly at night when ambient temperatures drop. Seismic monitoring networks provided the final piece. Every blast during construction, every drilling operation, every heavy vehicle moving through underground corridors generated vibrations that propagated through the surrounding geology and were recorded by global sensor arrays. Iran spent 40 years excavating tunnels, and every single meter of that excavation left a seismic record. The Pentagon and the IDF did not stumble onto the locations of Iran's missile cities in the weeks before the strikes. They had been systematically mapping, cross-referencing, and refining their understanding of Iran's entire underground infrastructure for years, building complete three-dimensional models of tunnel networks that Iranian commanders believed were known only to them. That intelligence foundation made what happened on March 7 possible. More than 80 Israeli aircraft conducting coordinated strikes across Tehran and central Iran, dropping 230 bombs in carefully sequenced waves designed not simply to damage but to systematically collapse. Simultaneously, American B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, the only aircraft in the world currently certified to carry the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator operationally, flew round-trip missions from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, 20-hour journeys, each carrying 2 of the largest bunker buster bombs ever constructed. Each GBU-57 weighs 30,000 pounds, 15 tons of precision-guided penetrating munition engineered for a single purpose: destroying exactly what Iran built. The bomb is not designed to detonate on impact with the surface. It is designed to penetrate. According to American military specifications, the GBU-57 can drive through at least 60 meters of earth before its delayed fuse triggers detonation. 60 meters. That is deeper than the deepest of Iran's tunnels, which were built at between 30 and 50 meters. The bomb does not need to enter the tunnel from above. It drives past the tunnel, embeds itself in the rock directly beneath or beside the hardened structure, and then detonates inside the geological mass surrounding it. The explosion does not produce a single blast crater visible from the surface. It produces a catastrophic shockwave that radiates through solid rock in every direction, shattering the reinforced concrete walls, collapsing the shock-absorbing foundations, and bringing thousands of tons of mountain down onto everything inside. A facility designed to survive a nuclear war could not survive a bomb detonating inside the rock it was built into. Satellite imagery captured after the strikes told the story in images that analysts spent days carefully interpreting. Planet Labs imagery showed collapsed tunnel sections at the Tabriz North Missile Base. Structural signatures consistent with penetrating munitions having driven through the overburden and detonated below the tunnel floor level. Debris fields around tunnel entrances indicated not simply surface damage, but deep structural failure propagating upward. At facilities near Shiraz, Analysts identified strike signatures indicating the site was hit multiple times in deliberate sequence, suggesting either that initial strikes had not achieved complete collapse or that planners were executing a methodical layering strategy to ensure no section of the tunnel network remained structurally intact. Sites near Khorramabad and additional locations further across the country showed similar patterns, the systematic signature of a targeting plan that had been rehearsed, refined, and executed with a kind of precision that only years of intelligence preparation makes possible. This was not Iran being bombed. This was Iran's underground military civilization being surgically removed from the inside. What happened to the people inside when those tunnels collapsed is something that military analysts discuss in careful, clinical language that nevertheless makes the horror of it unavoidable. The strike sealed major tunnel entrances under rubble and destroyed ventilation shafts. Forces operating inside, the hundreds of IRGC personnel who managed the missiles, monitored the command systems, maintained the launches, and staffed the underground facilities, found themselves in sealed chambers with collapsing walls and failing air supply. Facilities designed to be impenetrable fortresses became, in the span of minutes, sealed tombs. The cruel irony of Iran's 40-year construction program is that the very features that made the tunnels survivable against external threats, their depth, their reinforcement, their sealed design, made escape or rescue impossible once the entrances collapsed and ventilation failed. The mountains Iran spent decades hollowing out to protect its military capability became the mechanism of that capability's destruction. The strategic consequences extend far beyond what was destroyed in the initial strikes. Analysts examining satellite imagery in the days that followed identified something that reveals the full depth of the problem Iran now faces. A significant portion of the missiles and launch vehicles inside collapsed tunnels were not vaporized by the strikes. The equipment survived in many cases, buried under rubble but physically intact. Iran's missiles did not disappear. They became inaccessible, which for practical military purposes is equivalent to not existing. Iranian engineering units moved quickly to attempt to reopen sealed tunnel entrances, bringing heavy equipment to begin clearing the thousands of tons of collapsed material blocking access to buried weapons. Those attempts were met immediately with follow-up strikes. American and Israeli aircraft and armed drones had not simply struck and departed. They established a persistent surveillance presence over every known missile facility, orbiting above sites whose locations they knew with precision, watching for any surface activity that indicated Iranian forces were attempting to restore access to buried tunnels. Every time heavy equipment appeared near a collapsed entrance, it was struck. Every time clearing crews began making progress, precision munitions reset their work to zero. Iran found itself trapped in an unwinnable tactical cycle, unable to recover its buried arsenal because recovering it required surface activity. And surface activity invited immediate destruction from aircraft that Iran's degraded air defense network could no longer intercept or deter. That degraded air defense situation is itself a critical part of understanding how this was possible. Iran built its underground infrastructure on the assumption that surface-to-air missile systems would impose prohibitive costs on any sustained American or Israeli air campaign. Without that deterrent layer functioning, the entire defensive logic of the underground network unravels. Drones can orbit indefinitely over known tunnel sites. Fighter jets can respond within minutes to any detected activity. The surveillance never stops, the strike capability never sleeps, and Iran has no effective answer. Thousands of short and medium-range missiles, representing years of production and billions in procurement costs, sit in underground facilities whose locations American and Israeli military planners know in precise detail, waiting for clearing attempts that will be struck the moment they begin. The timeline of what rebuilding would require makes the strategic damage even clearer. If Iranian tunnel construction crews could achieve 10 meters per day under normal peacetime conditions, rebuilding the hundreds of kilometers of collapsed tunnel network to the original specifications would require not months but decades of continuous construction, conducted entirely under the surveillance of an adversary that demonstrated it knows exactly where to look and has the weapons to strike whatever it finds. Iran cannot rebuild in secret what it could not hide when it was building it the first time. The seismic signatures, the thermal anomalies, the radar reflections from fresh excavation activity, all of it would be visible to the same systems that mapped the original network. Every new meter of tunnel Iran attempts to dig would be catalogued, mapped, and added to targeting databases before the concrete had time to cure. What happened beneath the mountains of Iran on March 7, 2026 represents something genuinely without precedent in the history of military conflict. Not the destruction of a weapons cache or the elimination of a single facility. the systematic neutralization of an entire nation's primary offensive military capability, achieved not by destroying the weapons themselves, but by making them permanently inaccessible while eliminating the forces trained to operate them. All executed through intelligence preparation that took years, weapons development that took decades, and operational coordination between two militaries that produced a combined strike of breathtaking precision and consequence.